So hello and welcome back yet again to another evening with Mr. Jules Verne, a author who I'm going to be sad when we get to the end of this. And I just realized we're really close to the end of this. There are only 45 chapters and we are on chapter 39, and I don't know what we're going to read next. I haven't been to the bookstore lately, so I have a bunch of kind of just random books that I picked up that looked interesting, and the two Charles Dickens books still. I'll probably get to the bookstore soon-ish, but I can't guarantee when because winter has decided to be wintering, and I've been doing a lot more just hanging out in the house. You can probably tell if you look at the rest of my content, it's a lot more video game stuff because I'm doing a lot more inside-y stuff. Plus, I'm having a lot of fun building in The Sims again. I go through phases where all I want to do is build, and then I go through phases where I don't really want to touch The Sims except for my weekly live stream. So I'm on a Sims building kick and having a lot of fun with it. So, you just do what you do. I am looking forward to spring though. I think I'm tired of winter. But it's eternally spring or maybe eternally summer under the ground, which is where we are going to go as we jump back in to Journey to the Center of the Earth by Mr. Jules Verne, beginning with chapter 39. For another half hour, our feet trod on these layers of bones. We pushed on, driven by a burning curiosity. What other marvels, what new treasures for science did this cavern hold? My eyes were prepared for any surprise. My imagination was ready for any amazement. The lake shore, or the seashore, had long disappeared behind the hills of bones. The rash professor, unconcerned about losing his way, took me along, and we advanced in silence, bathed in electric waves. Due to some phenomenon that I cannot explain, and due to its by then complete diffusion, the light illuminated all sides of an object equally. Its source no longer resided at a particular point in space, and it cast no shadows. One could have believed that it was midday, in the middle of summer, in the equatorial regions under the vertical rays of the sun. Also, all the steam had disappeared. The rocks, the distant mountains, a few indistinct clumps of distant forests came to look strange in this equal distribution of light. We resembled Hoffman's fantastic character who lost his shadow. After a mile's walk, the edge of an immense forest appeared, but no longer one of the mushroom forests like near Port Gräuben. It was the vegetation of the Tertiary period in all of its magnificence. Tall palm trees of species that have now disappeared, superb pines, yews, cypress, and thujas represented the conifer family, and they were linked to each other through a network of lineas. A lush carpet of moss covered the soil. Some creeks murmured in the shade, which did not deserve that name since the trees cast no shadows at all. On the banks grew tree ferns, similar to those grown in hothouses on the inhabited earth. Only color was missing from all these trees, shrubs, and plants. They were deprived of the life-giving heat of the sun. Everything blended together in a uniform brownish, faded-looking hue. The leaves showed no green, and even the flowers, which were so numerous in the Tertiary period, where they first originated, now had no color or scent and looked under the impact of the atmosphere as if they were made out of faded paper. My uncle ventured into this gigantic thicket, and I followed him, not without a certain amount of fear. Since nature here had provided plant food, would there not also be fearsome mammals? In the large clearings left by fallen and decaying trees, I saw leguminous plants, acarane, rubicane, and many other edible shrubs that are liked by ruminants from all time periods. Then trees from vastly different regions on the surface of the globe began to appear, blended and mixed together. An oak grew next to a palm tree. The Australian eucalyptus leaned against the Norwegian fir. The northern birch interlaced branches with those of the New Zealand curry. It was enough to drive the most ingenious classifiers of terrestrial botany absolutely mad. Suddenly I stopped, and with my hand, I held back my uncle. The diffuse light allowed us to perceive the most minute objects in the depth of the thicket, and I thought I had seen... No, really, with my own eyes, I did see vast shapes moving under those trees. Indeed, these were gigantic animals, a whole herd of mastodons, not fossil ones, but live ones, similar to those whose remains were found in the swamps of Ohio in 1801. I saw these large elephants whose trunks were writhing under the trees, looking like a legion of snakes. I heard the noise of their tusks, whose ivory bore into old tree trunks. The branches cracked, and the leaves, torn off in considerable quantities, were swept into the huge maws of these monsters. So, the dream in which I had seen all this prehistoric world of the Tertiary and Quaternary periods rise again was finally becoming a reality. And we were there, alone, in the bowels of the earth, at the mercy of its fierce inhabitants. My uncle simply stared. "Let's go," he said, gripping my arm. "Onward!" "No!" I said. "No, we have no weapons. What would we do in the midst of this herd of giant quadrupeds? Come, uncle, come! No human can safely challenge the rage of these monsters." "No human being," said my uncle, lowering his voice. "You're wrong, Axel. Look down there. It seems to me that I see a living being, a being quite similar to ourselves. It's a man." I looked, shrugging my shoulders, and resolved to push skepticism to its farthest limits, but although I was reluctant, I had to yield to the evidence. Indeed, less than a quarter of a mile away, leaning against the trunk of an enormous tree, a human being, the Proteus of these underground regions, a new son of Neptune, was watching over this countless herd of mastodons. Imminus percursus custis imminor ipsi. Yes, imminor ipsi. This was no longer the fossil being whose corpse we had raised in the boneyard. This was a giant, able to control these monsters. He was more than 12 feet tall. His head, huge like a buffalo's, disappeared in the underbrush of his unkempt hair. It looked like a real mane, similar to that of the elephant of the first ages. In his hand, he wielded an enormous branch with ease, a crook, quite worthy of this prehistoric shepherd. We stood there, stunned and immobile, but we might be seen. We needed to run. "Come, come," I said, pulling my uncle away, who, for the very first time ever, actually let it happen. A quarter of an hour later, we were out of sight of this formidable new enemy. And now that I think about it calmly, now that my spirit has found peace again, Now that months have gone by since this strange supernatural encounter, what to think? What to believe? No, it must be impossible. Our senses were deceived. Our eyes did not see what they saw. No human being exists in that subterranean world. No generation of men dwells in these lower caverns of the globe, unconcerned about the inhabitants of the surface, without any contact with them. It's absolutely profoundly crazy. I prefer to admit the existence of some animal whose structure resembles the human structure. Some ape of early geologic ages, some Athrolopithecine. Wow, I messed that up. Like the ones discovered by Mr. Laurent in the bone deposit of Sanson. But in its size, this one exceeded all the measurements known to modern paleontology. No matter. It was an ape. Yes, an ape. No matter how unlikely. But a man? A living man, and with him a whole generation buried in the bowels of the earth? Never. And we actually have a picture of this man and his mastodons. Just chilling out, watching his elephants rip up the forest. In the meantime, we had left the clear and luminous forest. We were speechless with amazement, overwhelmed by a stupefaction that bordered on mindlessness. We ran in spite of ourselves. It was a real flight, similar to those terrible impulses that one is subject to in a certain sort of nightmare. Instinctively, we ran back to the Lindenbrock Sea, and I do not know in what vagaries my mind would have lost itself if it had not been for a concern that brought me back to practical matters. Although I was certain that we were walking on soil where we had never set foot before, I often noticed rock formations whose shape reminded me of the formations of Port Gräuben. This confirmed in any case the indications of the compass and our involuntary return to the northern Lindenbrock Sea. Sometimes one could have mistaken one for the other. Brooks and waterfalls were tumbling everywhere from hundreds of projections in the rocks. I thought I recognized the layer of Studerbrand that our faithful Hans Bach and the cave in which I came back to life. Then, a few steps farther, the arrangement of the cliffs, the appearance of a stream, the surprising outline of a rock would throw me back into doubt. Obviously, I told my uncle, we have not landed at our point of departure again, but the storm has carried us a bit lower. If we follow the shore, we should find Port Gräuben. Well, in that case, said my uncle, it is useless to continue our exploration, and our best course is to return to our raft. But, Axel, aren't you mistaken? I can't say for sure, uncle, because all these rocks look alike, but I think that I recognize the promontory at whose foot Hans built our boat. We must be close to the little port, if indeed it isn't right there. I said that as I examined an inlet that I thought I recognized. Axel, we should at least try to find our own traces, and I don't see anything, said my uncle. But I do, I said, rushing towards an object that was glittering in the sand. What do you see? This, I told him. And I showed my uncle a rust-covered dagger which I had just picked up. Well, he said, did you bring this weapon with you? Me? No, not at all. But you? No, not that I know. I've never possessed this object. Well, this is strange then. No, Axel, said my uncle. It's very simple. Icelanders often have weapons of this kind, and Hans, to whom this belongs, must have lost it. I shook my head. Hans had never had this dagger in his possession. So, do you think it's the weapon of a prehistoric warrior? Or of a living man? A contemporary of that giant we saw? No, this is not a tool of the Stone Age, though. I looked at it closer. Not even the Bronze Age. This blade is steel. My uncle stopped me abruptly on this path as I was about to go down another ramble, and he told me in a cold voice, Calm down, Axel. Be reasonable. This dagger is a weapon of the 16th century. A real dagger, like the ones gentlemen carried in their belts to give the coup de grace. It's of Spanish origin, and it belongs to neither you, me, or Hans, nor even to the human beings who perhaps live in the bowels of the globe. What are you saying? I asked him. Look, it never got chipped like this by cutting men's throats. This blade is coated with a layer of rust that's neither a day, nor a year, nor 100 years old. The professor seemed to be getting excited, as was his habit, and he was getting carried away by his imagination. Axel, he said, we're on the way towards a great discovery. This blade has been lying in the sand for 100, 200, 300 years, and it got chipped on the rocks of this underground ocean. Well, it hasn't gotten here on its own, I told him. It hasn't twisted itself out of shape. Somebody's been here before us, obviously. Yes, said my uncle. A man. And who is that man? I asked him. A man who has engraved his name somewhere on this dagger. That man wanted once more to indicate the way to the center of the earth by his own hand. Let's look. And with meticulous attention, we walked along the high wall, peeping into the moist and tiny fissures that might open out into a tunnel. So we came to a place where the shore became more narrow. The sea almost came to lap at the foot of the cliffs, leaving a passage of at most a fathom. Between two boldly projecting rocks, one could see the mouth of a dark tunnel. And there, on a granite slab, appeared two mysterious, graven, half-eroded letters, the initials of that most daring and fantastic traveler. A.S., shouted my uncle. Arne Sakmussen. It's always Arne Sakmussen. And that is the end of chapter 39. We're going to do our usual getting of a drink and everything, but so there are humans. There are giants. Obviously, what were the angels that were cast out for breeding with human women? Nephilim? Obviously, they're Nephilim. I mean, if we're going to go into sci-fi and fantasy territory, let's go full on, because a ginormous man herding mastodons. I like it. And I'm eager to see what's going to happen next. But first, a drink. He's not quite a fearsome mastodon, but he is cute. Do you want to go under the ground? Do you want to explore 20,000 leagues under the sea, or go to the center of the earth, or just pull down my blanket? He's like, no, I just wanted to come in and say hello. All right. With that, let's jump back in and read chapter 40 of Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. Since the beginning of our journey, I had been amazed so many times that I would have believed myself inured to surprises and blasé about any astonishment. Yet at the sight of these two letters engraved 300 years ago, I fell into an amazement akin to stupidity. Not only was the learned alchemist's signature readable on the rock, but I even held the stylus that had engraved it in my own hands. Unless I wanted to demonstrate glaring bad faith, I could no longer doubt the existence of the traveler and the reality of his journey. While all these reflections whirled in my head, Professor Lindenbrock indulged in a fit of eulogy for Arne Sakmussen. "Wonderful genius," he said. "You did not forget anything to open up the path through the terrestrial crust to other mortals, and your fellow humans can find the traces that your feet left 3 centuries ago at the bottom of this dark underground. You reserved the contemplation of these wonders for other eyes besides your own. Your name, engraved at every stage, leads the traveler who is bold enough to follow you straight to his destination. And at the very center of our planet, we will once again find it inscribed with your own hand. I too will inscribe my name on that last page of granite. But forever henceforth, let this promontory that you saw, next to the ocean that you discovered, be known by the name of Cape Sakmussen." That's what I heard, more or less. And I could not resist the enthusiasm that these words exuded. An inner flame jumped again in my breast, and I forgot everything. The dangers of the journey and the perils of our return. What someone else had done, I also wanted to do, and nothing human seemed impossible to me. "Onward!" I shouted. I was already rushing towards the dark tunnel when the professor stopped me, and he, the man of impulse, advised me to keep patient and calm. "Let us first return to Hans," he said, "and let's bring the raft to this spot." I obeyed the order, not without displeasure, and I slid rapidly among the rocks on the shore. "You know, Uncle," I said as we walked, "that circumstance has served us extraordinarily well so far." "Ah, do you think so, Axel?" "No doubt. Even the tempest has put us back on the right path. Blessed be that storm. It has brought us back to this coast from which good weather would have removed us. Suppose for a moment that we had touched the southern shore of the Lindenbrock Sea with our prow. What would have become of us? We wouldn't have seen the name Sakmussen, and we would now be abandoned on some beach with no exit." "Yes, Axel. There is something provincial in the fact that while we were sailing south, we were precisely going back north towards Cape Sakmussen. I must say that this is astonishing, and it's a fact whose explanation is eluding me." "Ah, no matter," I said. "The point is not to explain facts, just to benefit from them." "Undoubtedly, my boy, but but we'll resume the northern route. We will pass under the northern regions of Europe, Sweden, Siberia, who knows? Instead of burrowing under the deserts of Africa or the waves of the ocean, and that's really the only thing I care about." "Yes, Axel, you're right. And it's all for the best, since we're leaving behind that horizontal ocean that leads nowhere. Now we'll go down, down again and always down. Do you know that there are only 1,500 leagues left till we get to the center of the globe? Bah! I said. That's not even worth talking about. Let's go! Let's go! This crazy talk was still going on when we rejoined Hans. Everything was made ready for an instant departure, every package put on board. We took our places on the raft, and with our sail hoisted, Hans steered us along the coast to Cape Sakmussen. The wind was not actually well suited for a kind of vessel that was unable to maneuver against it. So, in many places, we were forced to push ahead with the iron tipped sticks that we had. Often, rocks, lying just beneath the surface, forced us to take quite long detours. At last, after 3 hours of sailing, that is to say, at about 6 in the evening, we reached a place suitable for landing. I jumped ashore, followed by my uncle and Hans. This passage had not calmed me down. On the contrary, I even proposed to burn our ship so as to cut off any retreat, but my uncle opposed this. I thought that he was acting strangely lukewarm. At least, I told him, let's take off without wasting any time. Yes, my boy, he said. But first, let's examine this new tunnel to see if we should prepare our ladders. My uncle switched on the Ruhmkorff device. The raft, moored to the shore, was left behind. At any rate, the mouth of the tunnel was less than 20 steps away, and our little party, with myself at the head, walked towards it without delay. The opening, more or less round, was about 5 feet in diameter. The dark tunnel was cut into the live rock and coated with the eruptive matter that had formerly passed through it. The interior was level with the ground outside, so we were able to enter without any difficulty. We followed an almost horizontal plane when, only 6 paces in, our progress was interrupted by an enormous block across our way. Damn rock! I shouted in a rage when I suddenly saw myself stopped by an insurmountable obstacle. We searched right and left, up and down, but there was no passage, no bifurcation. I felt deeply disappointed, and I did not want to admit to the reality of this obstacle. I bent down. I looked under the block. No opening. Above, same barrier. Hans shined his lamp at every part of the rock, but it offered no possibility to continue. We had to give up all hope of getting past it. I sat down on the ground, and my uncle paced up and down the tunnel. But what about Sakmussen? I said. Yes, my uncle said. Was he stopped by this gate of stone? No, I told him. This piece of rock has suddenly blocked the passage after some tremor or one of those magnetic phenomena that move the Earth's crust. Many years have gone by since Sakmussen's return and the fall of this block. Isn't it obvious that this tunnel was once a passage for lava, and that the eruptive material flowed freely back then? Look, there are recent fissures that groove in the granite roof. It's made of pieces that were brought here. Enormous stones, like some giant's hand, had worked on this foundation, but one day there was a more powerful push, and this block, like a keystone of a falling arch, slid to the ground, blocking our passage completely. It's just an accidental obstruction that I'm sure Sakmussen did not encounter. And if we don't overturn it, well then, we are not worthy to reach the center of the earth. That's what I said. The professor's soul had completely passed into me. Now the spirit of discovery inspired me. I forgot the past. I just scorned the future. Nothing existed for me anymore at the surface of this globe into whose interior I had burrowed. There were no more cities or fields or Hamburg, not even my poor Grauben, who probably had given us up as lost forever in the bowels of the earth. "Well," said my uncle, "with our picks, our pickaxes, let's make away. Let's overturn this wall." "It's too hard to use a pick." "What about the pickaxe?" "It's too long for a pickaxe." "But—" "All right, gunpowder. A mine. Let's make a mine and blow up this obstacle." "Gunpowder?" "Yeah, it's only a piece of rock to break." "Good idea. Hans, get to work," shouted my uncle. Hans returned to the raft, and he soon came back with a pick that he used to bore a hole for the charge. This was no easy feat. We needed to make a hole large enough to hold 50 pounds of gun cotton, whose explosive force is 4 times that of gunpowder. My mind was in a state of tremendous excitement. While Hans was at work, I helped my uncle eagerly in preparing a long fuse of wet powder inside of a cotton tube. "We'll make it," I said. "We'll make it," said my uncle. By midnight, our mining work was finished. The charge of gun cotton was pushed into the hole, and the long fuse ran along the tunnel and ended outside. All it would take now is a spark to start up this formidable device. "We'll do it tomorrow," said the professor. And with that, I had to resign myself to wait another 6 long hours. And that is the end of chapter 40. And we are resigned to wait about 23. So, wow. I foresee this big boom going very badly because I don't think they've remembered that they're in an electrically charged atmosphere, and I don't know how that would actually work out. I guess we're going to have to wait and see. So that is the end of that, and I am loving this story. I think the next time I head out to any kind of a bookstore, I'm going to see if I can get 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Because I know that's another Jules Verne work. And isn't there one that's like 80 Days in a Balloon or something? I'm just going to look for more Jules Verne because I'm having a lot of fun with him. So thank you as always for listening. I hope that you enjoyed those 2 chapters, and I will see you tomorrow.